What's up, guys? So I went to find my little list of Easter eggs for this video, and found that I had sort of previously recorded it and therefore deleted the note or something because I didn't have it. So I'm about to go on to Netflix to rewatch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 to get all the Easter eggs and references for you, and I will come back to this video after I've got them all in order and everything to present them to you. So I'll see you guys in about 2.5 hours. You'll see me in about 6 seconds. Alright, so I'm finished watching the movie. I have all of my Easter eggs and stuff in a list on my tablet, but it's like 12:20 in the morning, and I kind of need my sleep because I got a massive week of early starts coming up this week. And if I start doing the references and stuff now, I don't know I'm going to make it through it without passing out. So I'm going to go to bed and I will get to the references and stuff first thing in the morning. I'm also hopefully going to film all the other videos tomorrow for this series, as at 6:30 tomorrow I am watching Infinity War for the second time, and I'll be looking for all the Easter eggs and references and stuff, and that will allow me to then add those into my movie review video, which is sort of the end of this series. And yeah, so that's what I'm gonna go do. I'll see you guys in the morning, and yeah. Alright, so it's the next morning and we're getting straight into these Easter eggs. So the first Easter egg is the music, and just a quick note on that before I go any further. Two things about the music in this film. The first is that James Gunn, the director, wanted it to be part of the story, so the song choices sort of reflect whatever the story beat or the emotions are or whatever for the exact moment when they're played, as well as there's always some form of some source for the sound in the action. So in this opening scene, when the song Brandy, You're a Fine Girl by Lookingglass, which was released in 1972, is playing, it's playing through the car speakers, just as there is speakers in the Abilisk fight scene that Rocket sets up, and there's speakers on the spaceship, and there's the Walkman, or there's the club on Contraxia. There's always a form of sound in the action that the music is coming from, and that is called diegetic sound. But yes, as I said, Brandy is the first song that is playing in the 1980 opening scene. It has Laura Haddock reprising her role as Meredith Quill from the first Guardians film, and this scene ends with Ego revealing his plan right from the get-go, and leaving his seed behind. Not just the seed as in his plant that is an extension of himself for his expansion plan, but also his seed in the form of his son, Peter. We then come into the modern day, 34 years later, which puts it in time setting of 2014, meaning that this film follows on directly from the first one. So if you were wanting to watch the films in chronological order, you would actually watch both the Guardians films back to back. We have the star coordinate for the Sovereign is M49 5I0L 339 P21 plus H9LN I31. And are able to crack the code and find out what that translates to, please leave it in the comments below, because as far as I'm aware, no one has yet. The little radar thing that Peter's playing, or using rather, is a Mattel football handheld video game system. I never had one, so I don't know any other information on it. Peter and Gamora have a small conversation over guns versus swords and whose thing is what. And Gamora is using a gun to try and take down the obelisk. When it runs out of ammo, she has to switch to her sword, and that's ultimately how she takes it down. Which makes the little conversation kind of funny when Gamora actually says the words in sort of a questioning way, "I'm going to take it down with a sword." Drax mentions his sensitive nipples, which is why he's not wearing an arrow rig. It's also why in the first film, when the Ravagers give them all uniforms, that he looks at the jacket and then throws it away, because this is part of his character. And so that was sort of a reference to the fact that he would have had sensitive nipples, which he just outright says in this film. The Orloni, the little lizard rat things, are everywhere. And it's funny that they are again on Contraxia, on the Sovereign Planet, because Groot actually sort of attacks one in the opening credits, in a similar way to how Peter grabbed one and used it as a microphone in the first film. But yeah, in the first film, they're on Morag, they're in Nowhere, in the gambling, like on the gambling table. I'm pretty sure there are some on Xandar as well. And then in this film, they're on the Sovereign Planet. They have their own little home planet that gets affected by the expansion. They're on the Ravager ship. Yeah, they're just everywhere. And I think that they're just supposed to be like generic alien life form animals or something. We have dancing in the opening credits, similar to how Peter was dancing in the opening credits of the first one, when he was going to get the orb. Interestingly enough, in the first one, he's going to get the orb, which ends up being the big sort of thing that helps them beat the bad guy at the end. And at the end of this scene, Rocket steals the Anulax batteries, which they end up using as the explosives on the bomb that defeats Ego. So there's another similarity there, that they both end up stealing something of immense power that ends up beating the bad guy. The song that's playing while Groot is dancing around is Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra, which was released in 1977. The obelisk as well, that they are fighting at the time, is from the comics as well. He's from an alternate dimension instead of the main Marvel universe in the comics. He is from Earth TRN 562, and in that universe he is released by the Sovereign Priestess, not against her, at the Avengers Academy, and the Avengers eventually defeat and incarcerate it, whereas the Guardians just defeat and kill it. Star-Lord calls it a sea monkey, and then we get to go in and meet Aisha once it's dead. Aisha is from the comics. She has other names as well, like Kismet and Her, and she actually in the comics came after Adam Warlock, whereas in this she is the creator of Adam Warlock. As the Guardians are flying away from the Sovereign Planet, we have Lakeshore Drive by Aliotta Haynes Jeremiah, I hope I'm saying that right, and it was released in 1971. We finally find out why Groot stops dancing every time Drax looks at it, and that's because Drax hates dancing, as he sees the universe as split into two sorts of people, those who dance and those who do not. I do have a little reference here, but I think I might save it for my Infinity War breakdown, as it could be a bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen Infinity War yet. And if you haven't, really, what are you doing? You should go see it, like, right now. Like, stop watching this video and go watch it. It's so good. But yes, I'll save that one for later. The battleships of the Sovereign have sort of an arcade style to them. The seats that they sit on sort of remind me of the motorcycle ones, where you sort of sit on a motorcycle thing and you can steer it like that. And then of course the controls and stuff look like they're a lever and some buttons. As well as when they die, it gives you like a game over sound from the video game. And even when there's only one left, all of them crowd around the one guy that's left. And then when he ultimately dies and fails, can't beat the high score, they all call him a failure and walk away, despite the fact that they all failed long before he did. The quantum meteor field, which by the way is just an awesome idea, that the meteors would just appear and disappear at random points. But it is a reference to The Empire Strikes Back and its meteor field scene where they have to fly through it, because again, you have to be the greatest pilot in the galaxy to be able to navigate that. And it even comes right down to the pilots being some form of furry animal creature and a human. And like, even when you look at it, Han Solo is a smuggler and Peter Quill is a Ravager, which is effectively the same thing. So that whole scene is just a homage to that. We then end up on Bearheart, which came from the Incredible Hulk comics, number 110 from February 1969, and its star coordinate is M20 22A 483 4126 plus 306 CA12. And again, if anyone can decode that, that would be amazing. Star-Lord's shirt that he's wearing has the alien text on it, which translates to Gears Shift, and then has a smaller phrase underneath it, a Tenyak Galaxy invention, which references one of the art directors, Karen Tenyak, who not only worked on this film, but also on a couple of other Marvel MCU films as well. We then meet Ego for the first time. Now, Fox and Marvel did a deal so that Ego could be in this film, and it gave them greater freedom to sort of reimagine Negasonic Teenage Warhead however they liked in Deadpool. And both films worked out perfectly fine because of it. But I have a little sort of theory about our good friend Ego here, and it also relates to, in the comics, there is actually 7 Infinity Stones, and the 7th is the Ego Stone. But I will get to that theory later on in the video, as I have another sort of theory that adds to it, and so I'll just give the full theory in one go. We then end up on Contraxia, where the Ravagers are, In the comics, it is the home planet of a character named Marie, who ends up going to Earth and marrying an Earth scientist who is working on a thing called Zero Fluid. They end up having a child, who they name Jack, and he ends up somehow coming into contact with Zero Fluid and gaining the abilities of energy manipulation and projection, and then decides to fight crime as the hero Jack of Hearts. Its little star sign in the film is M15 5127512731 plus X1955KX. This is the only star sign to have been decoded in any sort of way. Everything after the X, everything after the plus minus the X's spells out the word seek. So whatever it is, we're seeking something. So if you have any idea of what it could be, what that first bit is, the M15 5127512731 bit is, please leave it in the comments below, because I'd love to know. The song playing at this club on Contraxia is, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but it has a sort of subtitle, which is The Unloved Song, and it's actually performed by Jimmy Urine, who plays one of the Ravagers in the film. I'll get to him in a second. We see Howard the Duck again as a nice little reference. Here he references possibly the worst Marvel movie ever. And there are a few that are pretty bad. But this one's possibly the worst. It is the Howard the Duck film from like 1963 or whatever. Because in that film, he has relations with a woman, and then here he's saying you're out of luck until you've gone duck, which just brings back so many bad memories. Just of the trailers. I haven't ever watched the film, and I never intend to, but I've seen trailers, and that's enough. It's honestly enough. We then see Tulk. He's the guy calling Yondu down, and he's the one that ends up becoming the guy we see get floated out of the Ravager ship, making him sort of the unofficial face of the Ravager mutiny. He is actually from the comics as well, in that he is a bounty hunter, first seen in the Annihilation storyline, where he works for Ronan. So is it possible that he was planted there by Ronan to try and keep the Ravagers busy while he destroyed Xandar, and then when that didn't work, you know, it was just by luck that Ronan was destroyed? I don't know. But in that, he's also a lumpy green-skinned alien and not a humanoid character like he is in the movie. So then again, my theory could just be complete and utter bullshit. We then hear Starhawk, Sylvester Stallone talking, and he's talking about how he met Alita, and how he said, and one of his lines is he says, "Alita, I love you, girl, but you're losing your mind," which could be a reference to how they become Starhawk in the comics by merging their bodies together, and sort of one allows their mind to just sort of sit back seat while the other uses the Starhawk powers. It tends to prefer Stakar as Starhawk over using Alita's body, as when it uses Stakar's, all its powers are heightened. And the closest thing that I can give to help you understand this, that's already out there in popular culture, is Firestorm, who is in the Legends of Tomorrow series on the CW. Effectively, Starhawk is Marvel's Firestorm. But as I said, we meet Sylvester Stallone's character, Stakar O'Gord, who is the male form of Starhawk. His second in command is the Crystal Eater dude, Martinex, played by Michael Rosenbaum. And in the comics, one of his hands shoots ice, the other shoots fire. And he is from Pluto, which is kind of cool. Also in this scene, we see Steve G's character, Jeff. He's the guy that has the goggles on. We then go back to Bearheart, and Rocket gets called all sorts of different animal names. He gets called Raccoon and then Trash Panda by Star-Lord. He gets called Fox by Nebula. He gets called Rat by Yondu, Puppy by Mantis, Triangle-Faced Monkey by Ego, and mistakes one of Groot's words as baboon. So he gets called 7 different things, which is obviously a reference to how in the first one Drax and Gamora called him rodent and vermin. But speaking of those animal names, when Nebula calls him Fox, I can't help but picture the video game character Star Fox, who is also an animal that flies in a spaceship with a bunch of other crew members. Granted, his crew members are a falcon and a wolf, I think, among other things. But it does sort of, the similarities are still there. They both use guns, they both look very similar, fly in a spaceship, etc., etc. And if that is sort of a half reference, despite that being like a 90s game and nothing from like anything before the 80s, which this film likes to use a lot of 80s stuff in, then it could be referencing the character Star Fox from the comics, also known as Eros, as he is what is known as an Eternal, which, in case you are wondering, the Mad Titan Thanos was also an Eternal, and he was just, because of his purple skin and sort of hideous figure, was sort of cast out by the Eternals society, and that's how he came to fall in love with Mistress Death and want to wipe out half of the universe with his fingers. The song playing is The Chain by Fleetwood Mac from 1977. We then meet Mantis, who in this is an alien. She was found in her larva state by Ego on her home planet, and then taken to Ego's planet and raised, and her main purpose is to help him sleep. I feel like the helping him sleep bit is because of how much guilt he has and having gone to such lengths to bear progeny, only to have them fail him, and then he ultimately kills them, which sort of adds a bit of empathy to his character. But at the same time, Mantis is from the comics, but in that she was a Vietnamese woman who somehow gained empathic abilities and grew antenna. So an alien definitely makes it easier to understand. Song 6 that's playing is Southern Nights by Glen Campbell, which was released in 1977 as well. Back on Bearheart, the Ravagers have found Rocket and Groot and Nebula, and they're starting to surround the ship, and Jimmy Urin's character comes in. He's half nut, and he's the guy that squishes and eats the spider. So yeah, Southern Nights is the song playing in that scene. We then go back to Ego's planet, and the song playing is My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, and it was released in 1970. The star coordinate for Ego's planet is G52, 22C, 848T12F plus E16UC22. And then in the scene as they're walking up into his palace, and then the first thing he says inside his palace, he identifies himself as a Celestial and that he was alone in the universe. And this again brings me back to that theory involving the Ego Stone, which could still be out there. So let me break all of this down for you. My theory states that Ego is a Celestial, as he says in the comic, in the film. He's not a Celestial in the comics by any means. He's not related to them at all. In the comics, the Celestials are those big things, and they're basically power, and they wear the suits to contain themselves. In a similar way to how Ego built a planet around himself to contain and protect his brain. Is the planet his suit? And so that obviously is part of the theory, is the planet his suit. The theory also goes that as the Collector says in the first film, there are singularities that predated the universe, and when the universe exploded into existence, the remnants of those singularities were forged into concentrated ingots. They didn't condense, they didn't just simply exist as stones after the universe exploded. They were forged into concentrated ingots. In the comics, the Celestials are beings from the first ever universe to exist. They desired evolution and the ability to adapt and change, which the universe that they existed in did not like. It caused a great war, which almost split the universe apart and destroyed all matter ever to exist. So it decided to exile the Celestials and sort of pulled back in on itself and self-contained itself, creating a second universe which adapted and changed and evolved, and it was called Eternity, which is important. We'll come back to that in a moment. But that is the universe that is the 616 universe, the main comic universe, and also therefore potentially the same sort of universe that, at least as far as storytelling goes, that the MCU could be set in. Now, Ego desired to expand himself across the entire universe and make everything himself. He desired more. Now, that ideology and thought process does not sit with the ideas of creating a universe that can adapt and evolve and change. It is simply covering everything and making it all yourself. And then you can only grow as much as you can grow, because you will then truly be alone in the universe, which makes the whole plan of the expansion kind of questionable. Like, why does he think this is his purpose if he was alone? Wouldn't he be wanting to do what Dormammu does and bring them all into his universe where they can all exist within a universe that is Ego? I don't know. But I believe that because of his ideology of wanting to do the expansion, the other Celestials cast him out. Perhaps it's his head that is the base of operations for Nowhere, and his brain just sort of floated out. Potentially he got some form of amnesia from it, which is why when he gained consciousness, he was alone and floating as a brain in the universe, and created the planet to protect himself, then set out to look for other life. And it would make sense then that the only thing he could remember about himself was the source of his power, the Ego Stone. Because we don't see any of the other Celestials except for Eson, and the only time we see Eson the Searcher, he has an Infinity Stone. So if there were 7 of them, as I believe there are 7 of them in the comics, each of them could have forged a different singularity into an Infinity Stone, and therefore they would have been its protector, until such a time as they were destroyed or whatever, and their Infinity Stone ended up somewhere else. That is my little celestial theory for the MCU. Ego does also mention that he's like a god with a small g, which fits perfectly with that theory, as the small g for a god is usually used when you're talking about pantheons, where they have gods and goddesses, both with small g's, which just puts him in the ranks of the other godlike beings, the Celestials. And then also the floating brain in space is a physics thought experiment known as Boltzmann brain, and it is, and I will quote from Wikipedia right now, a self-aware entity that arises due to extremely rare random fluctuations out of a state of thermodynamic equilibrium. And so if you can understand all of that technical jargon, well done, you know what a Boltzmann brain is now. The first little figure that Ego shows he met as the first other life in the universe other than himself is a Krylorian, and they are the pink people from Xandar, among which is Roman Day's wife and child. There is a Battle of Xandar callback, and I can't remember what it was. I have a feeling it was something during the sort of mutiny scene, which is where we're up to in the film. I have a feeling it was something to do with that. Xandar's mentioned anyway, and it's in regards to the Battle of Xandar. Taserface reveals his name, and it is as ridiculous as it sounds. James Gunn even posted on Twitter saying that he would never use that character ever, and then obviously he did, because he decided, no, you know what, Taserface sounds like the kind of name an idiot would give themselves because they thought it was cool. The Ravager code regarding children is a big thing in this film as well. It's the reason for Yondu's exile from the other Ravager factions. And in this little mutiny scene, once they lock up Yondu and Rocket, Jeff asks if he can smush Groot with a rock, to which Taserface says no, it's too adorable looking, so they simply just start kicking him and pouring beer on him. But it does mean that the Ravager code regarding children would state something along the lines of not being directly involved in anything that would cause them to come to be killed. I would say harm, but they kick Groot, which sort of, I mean, I guess if they're drunk and they think it's funny, maybe, but it still would go against the Ravager code. Then again, they did just mutiny against someone who sort of mutinied against the Ravagers in the first place, so it could just be that they can't come to harm. Yondu says that him and Stakar and the other captains were just like you and your friends to Rocket, obviously referencing the original Guardians, of which Stakar and Martin X, and Alita, who has already sort of been previously mentioned, are a part of. Vorka's eye comes back as the running joke from when Rocket said we need that guy's eye. He ends up getting that guy's eye in this film, which is kind of funny. Obviously he still has this fascination for cybernetic body parts, which makes you wonder exactly how much he actually is scarred by the fact that he was torn apart and made into a cybernetic sentient raccoon. Yondu completes his comic book look with his fin, instead of just having the little red casing, I guess, for whatever the machinery is inside his head. And when they break out, the song Come a Little Bit Closer by Jay and the Americans is playing, and it was released in 1964. and it's playing over the ship's speakers system, its intercom system. They eventually break out and escape from the Ravager ship and fly off on the third quadrant. They start jumping towards Ego through the 700 jump points, and one of them flies across Raya, where we can see some Cronins doing battle with each other. Interestingly enough, Raya is actually the name of a moon of Jupiter. Saturn. Moon of Saturn. My mistake. It's a moon of Saturn, and that is the planet that Cronins are supposedly from in the comics. I do have a question here though. Yondu says that it's not healthy for a mammalian body to do more than 50 jumps at a time, and that they're about to do 700. Then his, Kraglin's, and Rocket's face start getting like big eyes and weird mouths. But if you look at Groot, who is sitting on Rocket's shoulder, the same thing's happening to him, and he's a tree. So does that mean that Groot has a mammalian body, despite also being a tree? And does that technically make his species somewhere between fauna and flora? Because his species is known as Flora Colossi. So I just have a question about that. If you have a theory or an answer for me, please leave it in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear it. We then go back to Ego's planet. Bring It On Home by Sam Cooke is playing. It was released in 1963, and we know that this is the song playing. It's only sort of soft in the scene because there is dialogue on top of it, but we know it's playing because Star-Lord says that this is Sam Cooke. He then references the TV show Cheers, which, if you haven't seen, largely takes place in a bar, which makes sort of sense. And this is where we first hear Quill mention the unspoken thing, which you can see is an unspoken thing before Gamora even admits that it is, because she doesn't want to leave without Quill, and it gets to the point where Rocket actually has to shoot her to stop her from going to save him, which is obviously because of that unspoken thing. We again get Brandy or Fine Girl playing in the scene where Ego comes in and discusses that song with Quill. Ego then sort of is talking about the expansion with Quill, and touches him on the forehead, makes his eyes go all black and starry, and he says he can see eternity, which could mean he can see the entire universe, or if he's seeing the actual figure of eternity, is he actually glimpsing the multiverse? Because it wouldn't just be eternity and nothing behind him. There are other universes in the multiverse, and if he can see the entirety of eternity as if the figure from the comics is standing in front of him, that would mean that around him he'd be able to see some of the other universes that exist. So can he actually glimpse the multiverse, and is that why Ego wants to make everything him? Because it would then turn Ego into eternity and allow him to sort of witness something greater than just the known universe, which in that regard makes the expansion make sense. We then go back to Rocket and Yondu zipping through all their little jump points like a pinball machine, because if you look at how he sort of bounces around, it does look a lot like how a ball bounces around in a pinball machine. But we do go past the planet where Stanley is sitting down talking to some big-headed aliens. Those big-headed aliens are the Watchers, and they have sort of reserved themselves to not interfere with the goings on in the universe, similar to the Guardians, I think they're called, in DC Comics. They're the little blue guys that sort of set up the Green Lantern Corps in DC. But Stanley also tells them of a time when he was a Federal Express deliveryman or something like that. He was the guy that delivered Tony Stank's phone in Civil War, and he was in fact working for FedEx in that as well. We then go back to Ego's planet, and Ego reveals that he was the one that put the cancer in Meredith Quill's brain, to which Star-Lord instantly reverts back to being Star-Lord instead of seeing eternity, and starts shooting Ego. One of the first things to go completely is Ego's arm, which is only left as the energy that is sort of surging inside the body. Obviously, as the continuation of the reference that a character will lose their arm. As he's reforming himself, he turns himself into the form of David Hasselhoff, which is actually what David Hasselhoff is credited as playing. He's not credited as playing himself, he's credited as playing his form. Rocket and Yondu end up finally arriving at Ego, and they release a piece of machinery that Yondu once used to crack open the Bank of Ascaveria, meaning that was obviously one of the jobs that they've done previously. And if you remember from the first film, Star-Lord once had to romance an Ascaverian in Nova Records for some information. Obviously, we now know what that information was, as the two Ascaverians can't be unrelated. So my phone has a thing where it tells you that you've reached the maximum limit for recording something. So that's why the sudden cut here. Now, where was I? Yes, so as Rocket and Yondu are flying down to the planet, we actually get to see the face on the planet. And I can just imagine someone from the comics going, hey, you know what would be really cool? If there was a character who literally had the face of a planet. Face of the planet, oh my god. But yes, we get to see his comic book face on his planet. When they finally get down there, Star-Lord, one of the characters asks what Smurfette's doing there. I think it might be Rocket, I can't remember. Someone asks what Smurfette's doing there. In regards to Nebula, who is obviously blue-skinned and a female. We then go back up to the third quadrant, where Kraglin is sitting there singing a song. He's singing Wham Bam Shangalang by Silver, which was released in 1976. He then lets them know all about the Sovereign, which are coming to destroy them. And then obviously the song becomes louder for that fight scene, which, when it sort of ends, has the Mary Poppins reference that everybody knows. They all end up on the ground, and the camera does a circular shot around them, showing them all sort of preparing themselves for a big battle with the many tentacles of Ego, in sort of a similar way to how the Avengers all prepared themselves in a circular shot that showed you all their sort of various powers. We then go to planet Earth. After the first bit of the expansion, before it starts again, we get a shot of two older people asking what it is. These are James Gunn's parents, and they've been called Weird Old Guy and Weird Old Guy's Mistress, I believe, in the credits. Don't quote me on that. I didn't double check that particular fact, but I believe it's something along those lines. They're not just called old man and old woman. They have some weird crediting. The other planets we see in this part of the expansion sort of being attacked are Ura, which is the planet with the yellow people. They are called Archons. We see the planet Hala, which is the Kree homeworld. We see Aragos 7, which has some Hercturians, which are the guys with sort of the computer-looking hair. And then we also have the planet Isik, which has the sort of scaly woman on it protecting her baby, as that alien species is also called the Isik. During the flashbacks, we see young Quill. He is actually being reprised by the actor that played him in the first film, Wyatt Olaf. And then we come back to the present day, and Peter says, "You shouldn't have killed my mum and squished my Walkman," and starts to attack him to the tune of The Chain by Fleetwood Mac again. It's the second song to repeat, and it's the only other song to repeat as well. We then see the expansion sort of die down on Xandar, and this is an important plot point, and that the expansion is happening on Xandar, as it would mean that a whole lot of Nova Corps is out. And as we know from trailers, so I can actually say this, we know that Thanos gets the Power Stone in the Gauntlet. Power Stone's obviously being held in the orb on Xandar, and so with all of the devastation from the expansion, Thanos was able to just sort of swoop in and pick it up without too much of a fight. But having destroyed Xandar, it now means that the Xandarian world mind and potentially Roman Day would have to fly to Earth, meaning that Nova as a movie could be just around the corner. I'll go into a full theory about that in my Phase 4 predictions at the end of these Road to Infinity ones. When this second sort of wave of expansion ends on Earth, it has a car leaning up against it. The driver of that car is Greg Henry, as Peter's grandfather, the same as he was in the first film. Star-Lord then forms a Pac-Man around him, which doesn't make very much tactical sense, but does show his love for sort of 80s arcade games and pop culture, as well as could also make it that at this point Quill's just sort of just accepted the fact that he's going to have to kill his dad, which means that his dad's already sort of dead to him, making the thing that he's fighting just a ghost, if you want to get sort of psychological with it. During Yondu's funeral, when they're preparing him to sort of be cremated, I guess, in a way, we see his blue frog and his troll doll get placed next to his body, as well as some Cthulhu-looking thing, which could be a reference to something, but I'm not entirely sure. But the blue frog is from the first film. It's the thing that he says he likes to put in a line on his dash control. And the troll doll is what Peter tricked him with when he gave him the orb. The song that plays during his funeral is Father and Son by Cat Stevens, and it was released in 1970. We then get to see Ving Rhames as Charlie 27. He's the big guy wearing the yellow suit. We then get to see Michelle Yeoh as Elida O'Gord, and she seems to be on a Ravager ship, seemingly occupied by all females. And then we see a Yucca arrow amongst all the fireworks made out of Yondu's space ashes. The funeral scene as well sort of reminds me of the way Frigga died in The Dark World, how she sort of turned into space dust and turned into sort of the stars. It's also how Odin dies in Ragnarok, and as that's the next film, I can talk about that. He sort of dies and turns into space dust in that as well, which sort of says to me that the sort of powerful father figures, I guess, will just turn into space dust when they die. The next song that plays is during the credits. It's the first song that plays during the credits. There are 3 in total that played over the course of the credits. The first one is Surrender by Cheap Trick, which was released in 1978. Some of the credits, as they're all rolling down, start coming up as I Am Groot, and then they get to about halfway and they flash into what they're actually supposed to be. At the end of the first lot of credits, we have a picture of Cosmo, the space dog, from the first film. He was in one of the collector's vaults, and then afterwards was licking his face before we first saw Howard the Duck in the MCU. We get to meet 2 characters in this after credits scene, where the original Guardians come back together. The first is Miley Cyrus's Mainframe, which is that robotic head. Presumably, they're going to find her some sort of robotic body, so that she can actually sort of walk around and be a character in the next film. And the other one is the Red Space Snake. It is actually the character Kruger, and he's the Sorcerer Supreme of the future, which is how he's able to use magic to make the thumbs up. And if you sort of look at the magic that's used there, it does look very, very similar to the magic on Earth with Doctor Strange, right down to the little glyphs and stuff surrounding his hands when he's waving his hands around. We then come back into more credits, and we have the song Flashlight by Parliament, and it was released in 1977. The next after credits scene has Adam Warlock being sort of referenced as appearing in the next film. And then we come back in, and for the next 2 parts of the credits, we have the song Guardians Inferno, which is credited to a fictional band called The Sneepers, featuring David Hasselhoff, which was obviously made for this film, which was released in 2017. During the course of these credits, we have a shot of Grandmaster dancing, obviously foreshadowing that the next film is going to be Thor Ragnarok. The final disclaimer at the bottom of all the credits originally starts out as I Am Groot, and then it flashes and changes into, see if I can remember this correctly, no raccoons or tree creatures were harmed in the making of this feature. The same cannot be said for handlers of said raccoons and tree creatures, meaning that the people who had to, the animators, who had to animate Rocket and Groot are really the real heroes here. Now, they are all the Easter eggs and references that I could find in the film. If you look up the soundtrack online, it does have the song Fox on the Run by Sweet, which was released in 1974. I couldn't find where that song was in the film. That's not to say it's not there at all, but I just couldn't find it. It was, however, when I looked it up, as far as the movie goes, it was used in one of the trailers, which therefore associates it with the film and therefore puts it on the soundtrack. So it may not be in the film at all, it may just be this because it's the trailer song that it's on there. Then of course there are other trailers that have the chain on them, which obviously repeats itself. And the other thing I couldn't find was Rob Zombie's cameo. It's sort of James Gunn's signature that he will put Rob Zombie in, at least at a cameo level, which sort of says to me that James Gunn and Rob Zombie are trying to be the new Tim Burton Johnny Depp duo. But that's it. That's all of the Easter eggs and references that I could find. Obviously some of them were fairly obvious because they're front and center, but that is all of them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave me a comment. If you are able to decipher any of the star coordinates, or if you liked my theory, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button wherever it is on your device, as I make new videos fairly regularly. I need to get myself into an actual schedule of doing that. But that's all for today. Until the next video, guys, keep raising hell.